We're about to get into our interview, and we did this part earlier. I did this with Tom, but I just want to say one thing before we get started is that at the end of this video, we're going to offer a really great resource. It's a free resource, and it's going to be really helpful if you're dealing with this type of thing with the private debt collectors that we're going to talk about today. Make sure you get to the end of the video. If you really want to, you can skip to the end. Make sure you see that part because it's going to be really helpful, and it's an offer you're not going to see anywhere else, especially not for free. So make sure you check that out before you're done. And other than that, we'll launch into Tom running the interview. And I just wanted to make sure people knew that that was at the end, in case, for whatever reason, I didn't want to miss out on that.
Hi there. I'm Tom Groth. I'm a tax attorney in Connecticut, and I'm here today with Jared Altman. He is an enrolled agent. You're an enrolled agent, right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. He's an enrolled agent in Maine.
Yep.
And he practices in the area of tax resolution. And Jared had brought some interesting things up to me about private debt collectors and the fact that they're now getting accounts from the IRS and how that impacts taxpayers. And I think he has an interesting offer out there to help taxpayers with this problem. So I think we're going to talk a little bit about why it is a problem, what taxpayers can do about it, and how a professional might be able to help you with that type of problem. The first thing that I sort of thought of, Jared, when you were telling me about this was, it might be a little counterintuitive to some people because, we're always saying the IRS is the most powerful collection agency. People are afraid of the IRS. So why would somebody, what we were talking about a little bit is people being assigned to a private debt collection agency and not coming back to the IRS. Why would people want to have their case moved from a private debt collection agency to the IRS?
Yeah, and I would say that's a really good question. And I actually had a little bit of this conversation at a recent tax conference I went to, NTPI. It's a multi-year program that focuses on this kind of thing. And, there are some situations where you might not want to have it moved back.
Okay.
That's kind of advanced kind of collection strategy. But the reality for most people, if, you're not doing much about it, or it's sitting there, or you're not in a place where you can pay, because some of these accounts that are getting thrown over to the private debt collectors are CNC, which is currently not collectible. So the IRS's internal rule says, we really can't do anything with this because they don't have enough money to pay. But then it's being sent to a private debt collector who's going to call you, who's going to try to get in contact with you, who's going to probably try to harass you into a payment plan because that's how they get paid. So there's this interesting dynamic where, the IRS is the most powerful agency out there, and they're sometimes difficult to deal with, but at least the IRS has a playbook. At least they've got a set of laws that they have to follow. If an IRS employee is acting up or acting unreasonably, you've got a lot of recourse. They've got a manager. You can go to the taxpayer advocate. You can go to TIGTA. You can contact your senator. There's all sorts of things that you can do if someone is truly misbehaving. And because it's the government, there are channels to address that. But if the supervisor of your private debt collector is probably someone who overrides the amount of commissions he gets. He's not exactly incentivized to, make sure this person is acting appropriately. And, this isn't like a specialty firm these aren't specialty firms that have been trained in how to collect tax debt ethically. The major companies that are involved in this are the same people that you hear about getting in trouble when people default on their student loans, or other things. This is just standard debt collectors. Now, all of a sudden, instead of having a revenue officer or or a collections officer who at the very least is a government employee, and their goal is to service the case and have the government paid, but they have other metrics than, how many accounts did you close? And the other thing the other thing to think about with this, and this is why it's almost tragic. They've tried this 2 times before, and both times it failed. And last time, actually, for I don't know precisely why this happened quite this way because they didn't release all the information, but it's a commission-based program, and the IRS ended up losing money on it.
Yeah.
And my guess with that was that there were a lot of people that were harassed into payment plans they couldn't pay, and the IRS paid some kind of upfront commission rather than trails on everything. So, if you get someone on a $50 a month payment plan and you get 50% of it, and you get the first year's worth that month or something like that, wouldn't kind of like almost like life insurance, how they get compensated for that. That would be my guess. And because of that, or some other administrative costs that like went into that, the IRS ended up losing money on this program before.
And I think the IRS plan here now, I think, because I'm a little bit familiar with this, and I think from the politics side, it's sort of a way of sideways funding the IRS without, or at least hopefully for them, without saying that that's what they're doing. Because I think that there are provisions in there that essentially, if the IRS does collect money here, more money than they spend on the program, they can use that money to actually hire more IRS personnel. So I don't know if I'm right about it or not, or if you've heard about that. But I think that
I can comment on that a little
essentially bit. They don't have to get extra spending because it's authorized there. So if you collect it from here, even though it's money that's already owed to the government, then it's going to then you're going to get to use it, for your own purposes and in internal collection.
Yeah, they do get part of it, and then the Treasury gets part of it, I think, and then the private debt collectors get part of it, and then. But and this is one of the kind of really irksome things about this is they get paid from this, but they're not legally responsible for what these folks are doing. So they just kind of get the best of both worlds. Like,
well, to a certain extent, there's still some review, right? There's still some oversight. You can still appeal, certain actions that the debt collectors aren't even.
Yeah, in that case, it's usually like the FDCPA that you would invoke, the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act. But what I mean is, like, if they like harass someone or break the law, like you have to go after the debt company. The IRS isn't responsible, even though they hired and subcontracted it out. Which I don't know what other. I don't know what other industry I could just hire subcontractors in and shield myself from all liability. Like, that's just.
So just so I make sure I'm getting the general situation straight. Basically, the IRS has decided we can't collect from these people either because we can't find them or they can't pay. So now we're just going to hire somebody to annoy them because we can't actually legally do anything to get money from them. The IRS, right? The IRS has made a determination that it would either be too costly to get this money from this person, or that if they did it, they would essentially be knocking them, taking their boot and kicking them out of their house onto the street because they need that money to live, eat, and pay basic living expenses.
Yeah, that's my sense of it. I mean, clearly there's always going to be some outliers, but these tend to be smaller accounts, so people who don't owe as much. And these, if you don't owe that much and you have a lot of money, you're probably just going to pay it off or get on a payment plan. What it takes to survive in the U.S. right now in most places is, you don't necessarily have a lot of money to do this. And a lot of the folks, my experience, I don't know if you can speak to this. I know you specialize more towards innocent spouse cases, so it's probably more true for you. But most of my clients are not like bad people. They're not tax cheats. They didn't get themselves into this like on purpose by trying to game the system. Maybe they didn't maybe when they went to their bank and took out a distribution from their IRA because they were having a hard couple months. The bank said it was non-taxable because the bank doesn't know what they're talking about, or they didn't understand what withholding was and no one taught them, so they thought they were withholding, and then the money's spent and now they owe 20 grand because they didn't withhold all year. And like, how do you dig yourself out of that hole when you're making 40 to 100 grand depending on your expenses? Like, it doesn't go so far in a lot of places, and you still got rent, you still got mortgage, you still got kids who need stuff. Like, it can be really hard to dig yourself out of that kind of hole, especially if you're paying
Yeah,
on other
absolutely.
debts. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, no, I agree with you there, and I think even people who knew that they weren't paying their current taxes for
yeah.
whatever reason, because stuff happens in life,
Hmm.
and sometimes, especially when you're self-employed, or or your spouse is self-employed,
Hmm.
or you're working for somebody and you're really their employee, and maybe you're working in somewhat of an off-the-books situation. I probably don't really judge you for that because it's not my job to judge you on that. It's the government's job. All sorts of laws are probably being broken, but as a moral issue, you're not necessarily a bad person if you're working under the table. You just didn't think that it would become an issue, and all of a sudden it's become a giant issue because your employer got audited.
Yeah.
And they were told that they had to issue a 1099 to you, which you never thought was coming, and you never knew that they were going to send you. Or some people who just get paid in cash, get paid by a check, and don't really think about it, and think that they're on the payroll, and their employer actually at the end of the year is just going to give them a 1099. These are people that haven't really had too many jobs before, or maybe they thought they finally got a legitimate job because they're getting paid by a check instead of in cash, but the employer is still fully intending or even not intending on issuing them a 1099.
Yeah,
So
I'll clarify that.
It can happen in a lot of circumstances.
I think and that's, the next county over from me, Piscataquis County, half that county works under the table. It's just the reality. And I didn't want to come off as suggesting that, like, because some people did have problems or maybe knew they weren't doing something quite right, that, when I say that, like, most of my clients, or actually all of my clients, have never been tax cheats, I'm like, there's people, like, when I say what I do, sometimes people, like, think, like, oh, you're helping people get off who are just trying to game the system. And like, no, that's not the case. And even, someone who's working under the table, and, it's tricky sometimes. You got to decide between up here, am I going to pay my heat, or am I going to, make my estimated payment? And, in an ideal world, like, you make both. But, real people, sometimes it doesn't end up happening. And that, it doesn't make them a bad person. It just, they had a really tough choice and they made it one way. And, if they had made the other one, the pipes might have burst. You never know. So, and that might have been what they were dealing with. But that's so yeah, it's, and even,
like at the point, well, I just to add to that just a little more, at the point when you're going to the IRS and trying to make an installment agreement with them, right? You're, the past is sort of, it's not really that relevant.
Yeah, it's kind of immaterial at that point.
You're like even if you did something wrong in the past, like, there's still a path forward, and it's not like you're going to go to jail for it. The IRS just wants their money, and you agree with the amount of money, at least in principle, that they say you owe them. And the only thing you have to figure out now at this point is, can I really afford to pay that without becoming a ward of the state or going broke, or not being able to feed my kids and travel to work. So I think at that point too, even if it's not necessarily, when you're doing the kind of work that we do, you're not necessarily thinking even what somebody did in the past is almost completely unless they're trying to, unless you're in an audit or something like that and they're trying to defend it. But I mean,
you're right. It's completely in the past. I was kind of speaking to that, and I see where you might feel like some people might misunderstand what I was saying and think that I was saying.
I wasn't saying, I wasn't even saying that. I knew what you were saying. I was just clarifying. I wasn't trying to.
That's a good clarification, because that it's just, there's a lot of people who've never dealt with it who don't get kind of how you can get into that hole, just without even really intending to. And even if you kind of knew what was going on, the IRS has enough resources that you don't need the person who's helping you also as part of the prosecution. Like, like that's not necessary.
Yeah. So going back to these private debt collectors, and let's say somebody's assigned to one of these private debt collectors, and they're calling them, they're sending them letters. Maybe they're doing step tracing or something like that, whatever it's called. I don't really know what it means. But basically, they call your family to find out where you are. What is it called?
Skip
transfer?
Skip trace.
Skip trace. Yeah. Where they're trying to find you. They're calling people you know. They're sending letters to places where maybe you used to live, or maybe people you know still live. and they're doing all these things, and they're calling your cell phone when you're at work, and
We're
whatever
telling you
doing.
they're going to take your house. You know that they can't
Telling
do
you they're going
that,
to take
but
your house.
that's what they'll tell you.
Yeah, telling you they're
Yeah.
going to take your house, telling you they're going to take your firstborn, whatever it is, and so here we are. We want to get these bullies off our back, and we want to get back into the gentle, comfortable, friendly, and at least accountable hands of the government.
Exactly.
Can somebody do that? Can they just say, I don't want to deal with a collection agency. I want to go back to the IRS, please?
Yeah. And, as strange as, most people, can I go back to the IRS, please? Sounds really strange coming out of anybody's mouth. But it's really just a matter of sending off a letter, to the appropriate place in the IRS and to the appropriate people, and then they'll just stop, and the case will be sent back. And if it's not, you have recourse that the law hasn't been filed. This is what I was mentioning in my podcast, that most of this program is smoke and mirrors, because anybody who doesn't want to deal with them doesn't have to. But they're kind of banking on the fact that most people don't know how to navigate a bureaucratic system like this.
Yeah. Now, what to me too. Again, just would somebody probably want to speak to someone like me or you before they just went ahead and sent off that letter to get back into the hands of the IRS? I mean, what could possibly go wrong once they get away from that private debt collector and those annoying phone calls? Is it possible that somebody can make things worse for themselves by going back to the IRS?
I think that there's always the possibility to make things worse for yourself, just because you don't know what you don't know. And that's one of the difficult things with this, is that, if you send something to the wrong place and then it doesn't get through, or you don't send the right letter to the appropriate places, you think you're good and then you're not. And then, you're calling up the IRS going, what's wrong? And you're getting someone who doesn't know what's happening because it didn't get into their system right. And it just can lead to a lot of pain and frustration that, kind of a professional can just make very simple. And, I mentioned that sometimes it might make sense not to leave the private debt collectors earlier. And, that's kind of a strategic discussion, because, when your account is with them, they can't collect, and the IRS they can't enforce collections. So they can't levy your account. But the IRS can. And so, there's a strategic conversation there of, do you want to deal with these private debt collectors? And, this is the example I might give, is like, if this is a 9-year-old debt and you haven't told your collection statute at all, so you got a year till it can't be collected anymore, maybe you don't want to go back to the IRS right now. Maybe you want to just deal with this for a year, and then then the debt goes away. So there are kind of
keep blocking phone numbers, keep ignoring phone calls,
because no one's going to levy you while you're there. So that's you got to do a transcript analysis to figure out if that's the right decision or not.
Because eventually it's going to go back to the IRS, or they're going to tell the IRS, hey, levy this person, and it's not necessarily going to be you're not going to really have that much advance warning from it. I also wouldn't be surprised if they end up with the general atmosphere in this country, between sort of, what I might see, I shouldn't get too political here, between the direction we're moving in terms of cronyism between private business and the government. It only takes one or two administrative changes, I think, even possibly. I don't know if this would, I'd have to look more closely at the law, but I think they could potentially start working more closely with the IRS and just asking the IRS to levy somebody if something gets difficult. So, private debt collectors still talking to you on the phone, and now they have a credible threat. Actually, no, I'm just going to tell collections at the IRS to levy you if we don't work this out now.
Yeah.
Or I'm sending you back to the IRS.
And that's the thing that they'll say.
No.
They've gotten in trouble for basically intimating that they can levy or take your house or seize property, and currently they can't. But you're right, that could change. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and another thing I think that we should put out there that people should know is that these private debt collectors, it's sort of screwed up, because it's opening this up to the scammers again, which are still going on, where they're calling people, telling them that they're going to be under arrest, so that the IRS is going to take, IRS is going to they owe the IRS. They better pay today. You buy an iTunes gift card, or pass by credit card or PayPal or Western Union. These guys don't take the payments, right?
Yeah.
They're still they make you have to actually, even if you get into an agreement with them, those payments are actually still processed by the IRS.
Yeah, you're still getting put on an IRS installment agreement. That's what they're setting you up for, and that is one of the difficult things. Tax advisors and tax lawyers and CPAs and anybody who deals with this stuff has been telling people for years the IRS will never call you, and that's still technically true. The IRS will never call you, but their subcontractor might. So
right,
it's just
they might.
it's all this. It just makes this whole thing
and
very
your family.
confusing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was actually the offer we were talking about today. I was going to share it. It's on my other blog post too. Like that you can get help from a professional. If you have a legal assistance society and you're low income, they might be able to help you with this too. There are other resources. We're not the only ones who can help with it. But this kind of thing really annoys me, and it's kind of super simple to fix. So one of the things I offered in my own show is that if someone's having problems with this in particular, like they've got a private debt collector on their back, I don't think this is how we should run our country. And I'm kind of mad that Congress did it. So
yeah.
I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is on this. And I will send the right letter off to them. I've got the form letter. I know where it goes. I'll post some resources on my blog too. If you really want to do it yourself, you can. But as far as, making sure it goes to the right places, I'm happy to do that for anybody for free. There has to be an engagement letter because I got to cover my butt. Even if you're doing something nice for people, you still got to worry about liability. And then the only other thing is, I want to interview you after, and we'll do the whole 60 minutes thing where your voice is changed and there's no picture if you don't want anyone to see you. But I just want to show people in this broadcast or another one that like this is a solvable problem. Like it's not, you don't have to deal with this if you don't want to. And if we can help you solve that problem, I want to help give other people hope that they can get out of it too, so that we can really stop these guys in their tracks.
Okay, well, we'll make sure you give me the link to that, and we'll put it below wherever this is posted. But do you want to give anybody any way to contact you or anything like that?
Yeah, I think when I edit this video, I'll add it in the text below, so you can't.
Okay.
Neither of us can see it now, but you'll see the link to the place where you can actually schedule a meeting for this, and then I'll be able to send that right off, and we'll get those jokers out of your life. So
okay, cool. And I'm just gonna do a quick plug for me, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, quick. Of course.
I'm Tom Groth. I'm a tax attorney in Connecticut. I've been practicing tax resolution for several years. And you can give me a call if you ever want to talk about anything tax resolution, tax court related, with an attorney at 844-4-TOM TAX. And you can, especially innocent spouse cases, you can also find me online at tom.tax. And if you're in somewhere like Maine or something like that, or if you got this private debt collector, you should probably go to Jared, and you should go to Jared probably a lot of the time. So I help people with a lot of like audit stuff and collections, but most of the time with collections cases, most of the time I'm helping businesses. Most of the time it's for large amounts or complex amounts that are in some sort of dispute, and I definitely wouldn't provide this service that you're offering to provide for free. At this point I just wouldn't do it, but I understand why you're doing it, and I think it's really great that you are.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing with Tom, where Tom is really great, and this is I have a little bit better of ability to, I think, to kind of assess this. I'm not an attorney, but I'm pretty much halfway through my Master of Taxation at this point, and that's not a JD, so I'm never going to be an attorney. No offense, don't really want to be.
Right.
But all of that is tax law. And it's taught by the same people who teach at the law school in that school. So, I've worked with Tom before and looked at some innocent spouse stuff with him, and I can tell you that, his ability to kind of go through that in a kind of conversational way. There's a lot of people out there who say they can do everything, and they sort of can, But if you really want someone who's going to take good care of you on that and be able to hold somebody to the fire about what the rules are for kind of innocent spouse situations, like he's the one you want to talk to. So
yeah, and well, and I'm sure, and we already said we agreed as part of this. We're gonna do some videos on those too. So
yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to doing that, and I really appreciate this call. Do we have anything else that we wanted to talk about, or?
No, I think we're good. Just you'll see the website down below. I'll also put Tom's website in there in case you didn't have a chance to write it down, so you'll be able to see both of those. And absolutely, he's great. And if you're kind of up in the main area or somewhere else, you can give me a call. But otherwise, his information's down there. And I don't really handle audits, and I'm not really interested in businesses at this point either, just because of where I am. Yeah, it may change over time. We'll see. But yeah, give him a call, and he'll treat you right. So.
Also, just one more thing: like, comment, share,
ask questions,
do all that stuff. It's awesome. Ask questions. We'll know where this video is, and we'll respond.
Yeah, exactly. So
awesome.
That's if you. This is actually the other promise. If you leave a question down there, it may not be with both of us if we can't finagle our schedules, but there you will get an answer within the week of when I see that comment. If I don't see it right away, but it'll get pumped out. And if you bump me or something and tell me, hey, I did this and I didn't see it, when I confirm that I've seen that comment, you will get an answer in a video form within a week.
So, awesome.
That's all.
All right, Jared, good talking to you.
Good talking to you, too. You have a great day, bud.
Take care. Bye.
Okay, we're good.